Thank you for viewing this YouTube archive of a Conscious Consumer Network broadcast. Please feel free to share it far and wide. Check out our weekly broadcast guide for weekly updates on scheduled broadcasts. Help keep us on the air by contributing to our network support fund. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or get in touch via email. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
Today, Conscious Communities has the honor and privilege of talking to Jacque Fresco and Roxanne Meadows from the Venus Project. And it is a real honor to have both of them here to talk to us, because we were first inspired by the Venus Project way back when we first started realizing what was really going on in the world, and that indeed there were real tangible solutions available to sort out these problems. Jacque and Roxanne have really inspired me to believe in the fact that we can, in fact, make a difference and change the world because of the amazing work that has been done and has culminated in what has cumulatively become known as the Venus Project. So thank you, Jacque and Roxanne, for joining me. And first off, a very big happy birthday. What is it like to live to see how the world has developed, Jacque? I mean, you've been around a long time.
It seems like yesterday.
Really? It's just gone all that quickly?
Yeah. I've been very busy all my life.
I bet. And, you know, we've appreciated the work that you've put out. The legacy that you've created truly is inspiring for all of us who dare to dream of creating a better world. So thank you for all the work and effort you've done. And it's amazing that you're still so, you know, going so strong after all these years and still, you know, keen to get this information out.
She said, thank you for the legacy and all the hard work you've done. And it's amazing that you're so keen and still working at your age to get the legacy out.
Thank you.
What made you want to change the world? What inspired you to go in the direction that you've gone with your work?
I see that if we continue the way we're going to suffer a great deal. The majority of people are going to suffer. So I feel sorry for the majority, and I would like to see a preventative method installed.
And what inspired you in your early age to go in this direction?
The last depression, 1929. Thousands of people that were hungry and starving, and the soup kitchens, all of that inspired me.
Okay. Now, give us a little bit of an example of how the Venus Project is obviously poised to get rid of problems such as hunger, poverty, and war long term. How do you propose to do that?
We intend to get rid of war, poverty, and hunger by installing a resource-based economy.
Okay. Give us a little bit more of an explanation on your vision of the resource-based economy.
More explanation on your vision of what a resource-based economy is.
In a resource-based economy, we do a survey of the Earth's resources, and we figure out what can be done to take care of everyone. But in order to do that, you have to do a survey to see what you have and base the society's design on the available resources of the economy.
The resource-based economy, essentially, it's not communism, it's not socialism, not fascism, not a democracy. It's based on, as Jacque was saying, available resources. Jacque originally tried to look for the root causes of the problems, and he essentially came to the conclusion that it is the monetary system that causes problems. Elitism, scarcity, it's based on scarcity. a resource-based economy is based on making goods and services available to everyone without a price tag, without barter, credit, or servitude of any kind.
Money.
Yes, and especially money. We don't need money anymore. Money is an interference factor between what you want and what you're able to get. We have enough technology. People are beginning to say this all over, to create abundance for everyone. And we can do that if we use and organize our resources intelligently. And this is what the Venus Project lays out, and this is what the resource-based economy is, very simply.
Hugely inspired by that, Roxanne. Thank you for that very clear explanation. You know, it's most certainly is needed, because it just appears that the world is getting worse and worse every day. I'm South African. I'm very aware of how people are starving, going without, the lack of electricity, lack of clean drinking water, when there's so much water in the ocean, and yet it's the corruption in services that is to blame, not the lack of the resources. And this is something that we've been trying to educate people to, is how to use your resources effectively so that nobody has to go without. And it seems like you guys have figured that all out.
Well, the only way to eliminate scarcity is to eliminate money and make things available to everybody in equal amount, whatever they want, within the confines of the Earth's resources.
Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to quickly expand on, when you say eliminate money, there's a lot of people who get very uncomfortable with that idea, because they've worked so hard their whole lives, you know, to build themselves, you know, a golden gilded cage to imprison themselves in, so that they don't get touched by the ugliness, the suffering, the crime, and the poverty. There's a lot of people who've worked very hard for that. And they're obviously afraid of perhaps not having the same quality of life if suddenly money had to disappear and everybody was then equal. Could you expand on that?
She's asking to expand on, a lot of people have worked very hard to get the money that they have, and, you know, live privileged and enclosed lives, and are very afraid of just eliminating money.
It's been done a long time ago. It exists in every civilized nation, the public library. There's no money exchange. You go in, you get whatever books you want to take out. You can take out as much as 6 books, and you don't need to pay anything. That's a resource-based economy. As long as you got the books, you can lend them to people. And when they're through reading it, they return it, so other people can use it.
And that's true with all resources, that goods and services are made available to everyone. Next door to the library, you might have a musical instrument center where you can go in and check out whatever you want. All your needs are available, and you bring it back when you're finished. If you use it continuously, you can keep it, but things are kept in key shape. You know, Jacque, just very briefly in terms of how the wealthy would be afraid of eliminating money, Jacque has had a little story where this was true. A very wealthy man came to him and said, you're so smart, how come you don't have any money? And Jacque said, you're so wealthy, how come you're not smart?
Yeah, very, very clever.
They don't understand that within what we are talking about, when you organize society and you have all technicians, people who are working for public health, doctors, people who are working on clean sources of energy, when you have all of the scientific disciplines and the people working within them, working for the betterment of people, and have the access to the resources and the goods and the services and the labs and the tools that they need to work with, even the wealthy could live in a very high standard of living, much higher than they do today. And they don't have to escape to their houses with bars on their windows and bulletproof windows in their cars, and in some instances helicopters on their rooftops to escape to when things get bad, because things are going to get bad and they know it as well. They really don't know what to do, and they're beginning to talk about it. So this does not hurt anyone, a resource-based economy. It enables everyone to be educated, and when you educate people and they're working toward the betterment of your life, you're happy to see everyone. There's no need for stealing. There's no need for any type of hoarding either. It eliminates jails originally eventually, because you teach a new value system. All of the values that you learn in this culture go to support the culture that you live in. Greed is good, clean coal, smart weapons that they give us, and militarism and patriotism all goes to support the militant cultures that we live in. And we're posing an alternative to all this.
Right. Now, have you been offered any help in terms of research, development grants, or finances from banks, or any kind of resources to develop the Venus Project any further?
Have we been given any grants or resources from any other?
Not yet.
We do have people on a small scale from all over the world who donate continuously to help the work that we're doing at the center here, to produce more books and more videos. But we have really not gone out for grants in the past. We most likely will in the future as we start developing and working toward the city, which we'd like to do. So we just have not met anyone who is in that position to do something like that.
So I just want to clarify that you don't have any working collaborations or in place, or you haven't received any funding from organizations such as the Dragon Family or Swiss Indo?
No, they did approach us and they wanted to use our technology and our city designs. We agreed to do that only when that opportunity arises, that if we do a city, it would be run by the Venus Project and for the direction of the Venus Project. Otherwise, we wouldn't partake in that. So it was verbal, but so far nothing has happened.
Yeah, no, well, definitely, we've been keeping an eye out on funding coming from these sources as well. And we've not seen anything from that direction because we were aware that some of it was potentially going to you guys. And I was like, wow, and that is a good place to send the resources if they're available, but nothing's been made available yet. So we're watching out for you too.
Oh, thank you.
Now, there are many conspiracy theories about the Venus Project saying that it's part of a transhumanist agenda, which is all about artificial intelligence and mechanizing humans, because a lot of what you talk about is automation and making life easier for people with mechanics and technology. Could you please comment on this?
Well, that is the basis, one of the bases of the Venus Project, that we use automation and cybernation to eventually eliminate boring and mundane jobs. There's a lot of different versions of transhumanism, but mostly what I've seen is that they use technology to enhance their physical performance and their biological, being. So I have not seen them address the problems of society, even in Singularity, where the Singularity of Kurzweil, where he wants to join technology at a certain point with the human body. He doesn't touch the social system. They talk about a better world without poverty, without hunger, but they don't lay out what that is or how to achieve it. And if you don't touch the monetary system in regards to that, you're playing it very safe and you're not dealing with the basis of the problems. So, and if you do produce a more enhanced human through technology, who do they serve? What is the purpose? What is the direction? And what is the end goal? They don't really have that laid out, and how to achieve that. How do you achieve clean air, clean water, more nutritious food, good housing for everyone, a relevant education for everyone. These are the needs of society. And if you don't have a plan for that, then then this tremendous human potential that they talk about with technology would only be used against us, as technology is today, for the most part. Even if it's clean sources of technology, you have to go to work and be subservient and pay for it.
What sort of technologies are you working on at the moment?
What technologies are you working on at the moment?
The technology of changing people.
That's a good answer. But like I remember seeing videos of memory metal and all sorts of things like that. So I was thinking perhaps that there was something else that was had come out since I last spoke to you. Anything you wanted to share with us that perhaps it had in development?
Mass production of houses, extruding houses, squeezing them out like aluminum extrusions. We can turn out houses very rapidly if we wanted to.
Yeah. Well, that's a very necessary technology to sort out and alleviate huge amounts of problems that we've got at the moment with various elements, refugee crisis, poverty in Africa, all sorts. And it's absolutely astounding to me that more energetic currency and resources is not going behind developing what you guys have developed at the Venus Project, because it just seems it's the answer to everything. I've looked across the board at all these various social structures that various people are introducing, everything from Michael Tellinger's Ubuntu to what we call the CVACs, the Creation Value Asset Centers, and every single one of these various social structures I looked at, ultimately there was still the necessity for some kind of trade, a barter, and resource, which messed up the whole paradigm. In all the years that I've been looking, and Venus Project really was the first thing that came to me and I went, yes, this is something that can tangibly work. I've not found anything else from every other system I've looked at that comes anywhere close to effectively being able to do what you say that resource-based economy can do, which is eradicate war, poverty, and hunger. So we're very much in support of you guys and all the amazing work that you're doing, and really want to clear up a lot of the fallacies with regards to some of the misnomers that they have, and it just seems that there's a lot of negativity with regards to calling the Venus Project, as you say, communism or socialism. For people who have done incredibly well, they feel perhaps threatened by the system because they don't want to change. And it's a very brave thing to be doing what you're doing, because obviously there's a lot of people who don't want money to go away. It keeps them in power. So the next place I want to go with the questions is asking, have you had any threats of any kind because of the freeing and empowering technology you're delivering?
Have you had any threats of any kind because of the technology and the system you're delivering?
We're too new to have threats.
Yes, I think as it develops, and you know, it's very hard to get on the mainstream media, of course, the corporate media that's getting tighter and more monopolized and more restrictive for any outside information, but what they want shown. And of course, the Venus Project would not be that, because it talks very much against what they're supporting. So we are not really a big enough threat yet. But we think it will grow. It has been growing. We have chapters all over the world. We have new documentaries and new information coming out all the time. So we are reaching more people. And I think if it does become a threat to them, then we would see more problems and more kickback from that. But we haven't at this time.
Well, what surprises me is that I haven't been shot yet.
Okay, well done, Jacque. You made it to 100. They obviously haven't come for you yet.
She said, well done, you made it to 100. They obviously haven't come for you yet. Did you hear?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I remember the interview I saw of you, Jacque, with Larry King, which, what really inspired me about that was filmed 2 years before I was born. I was born in 1976. And when I saw that, I was like, this guy has been on the same story since before I was born. He knows his stuff. Because it does take a huge amount of experience and perspective to develop your state of mind to the point where you realize what works and what doesn't based upon tangible life experience. So, I think it takes someone who's been around as long as you, Jacque, to actually work the stuff out. And your system, the resource-based economy, for me, is, as I said already, the only system I've ever come across that will actually work long term.
She feels that the Venus Project is the only system she's ever come across that would work long term, and she's looked into many others, and that it takes somebody who's been around long enough to have life experience to be able to develop this.
Yes, this is true.
And it's really not just a socioeconomic system he's talking about, it's not that he read books and put things together. He was really first and foremost a scientist, where he worked in many, many different disciplines. This is why he could accomplish this. He knew that everything was science, and if you worked in only one discipline, you couldn't come up with a new social system. So most importantly, he's worked in behavioral science and has done many experiments to arrive at the things that he arrived at. It was really a lot of hard work, and backed it up technically as well. The things he does, the drawings and the designs that you see on the website, they're not just artistic renditions. They're really technically can be developed. And we have blueprints and drawings of what the insides of a lot of these things would look like and how to develop it.
Wow. I would love to see a little bit more of the stuff that you guys design, and I've seen the videos, always very inspired by everything that I see. And I guess I just want to know, where to next for the Venus Project? What are you guys up to, and what are your plans?
Well, if you look at our aims and proposals on our website, starting from books and videos and seminars, and we have a 21-acre research center here in Venus, Florida, hence the Venus Project. And then we've done documentaries. We've just finished The Choice Is Ours, which is on our homepage of our website, thevenusproject.com. It's an hour and 37 minutes. It was a big project. We're working on a major motion picture. We've been working on it for a while, but those things take longer than you expect. And we are working toward the city. You could check all that out in our aims and proposals. And we do give seminars here too every Saturday, which help support the project. We produce our own books. We have many books. We have many lectures online. We have a lot of free lectures on our YouTube channel, which can be found on our website as well.
Brilliant. With regards to what it is that we, the public, can do to raise awareness and obviously help see this vision come to fruition, what can we do?
Well, first I'd say learn about the Venus Project. We have a lot of learning tools. We have books. Check out our website, our store, and our free books and downloads as well. We give courses on the Venus Project. You can see them on our website as well under volunteering on the homepage. A lot of people are teaching others about this, and they're organizing to do that. So first and foremost, learn about it, and then talk to others. If you're not in a position to do anything else, if you can't help build the city or donate or anything, that's fine. But what's most important is talking to others about this new direction. It will be tremendously helpful.
Well, on that note, I remember it is what I wanted to say there. Would we be able to, you said you've got some new documentaries and stuff coming out. we have a live broadcast network. We'd be honored if we could broadcast some of your material as features and perhaps do it on the back of, say, like an interview like this, and actually properly promote it as a featured presentation on a specific night, which gets promoted through our social media so people know it's coming out. We'd want to offer our platform to you to use at any time for any premieres of this kind.
Thank you. Well, it would be wonderful if you could show Paradise or Oblivion, which is about 48 minutes, or the new one. I don't know if you've seen The Choice Is Ours. It's a 4-part series. You could even do it in parts.
So The Choice Is Ours, okay.
Check that out. It's on our homepage. Yeah.
We have the permission to broadcast it?
And it's a wonderful tribute to Jacque, too, I think, the last video. It's part 3 and 4 that has the solutions.
Fantastic. Oh, wow. I'm so proud of you for everything that you've done. You've really made this very clear to people. One of the things that inspired me the most about when I first came across Jacque Fresco speaking was, at that time, how very passionate he was about everything he was saying and how clear and concise he was about it, but also very much what I grasped from you both was heart, more than anything, you know, that connection, that need to do better because we deserve better as human beings. And for me, that's what I really, really connected with, was that I think deep down inside, we all know that we're not doing what we should to create a better world.
Did you hear her?
No.
She said when she listened to you, there was a lot of passion and you knew what you were talking about and you said it concisely, but what influenced her a lot was the heart of, or how we were saying it, that she all knew, I mean, that we all know we need a better world, but you were actually, he lays out how to do that. I think that people are just beginning to catch up with the knowledge and what Jacque is talking about and the need for what Jacque is talking about. They're beginning to realize that technology is displacing people and they have no idea what to do about it, that the environment is, you know, just running amok and they're not doing anything about it. They're talking, but there is no plan to do anything, nor do they're just going to keep running this into the ground to keep as much as they have for as long as they have. The only thing that's organized is the military to oppose people who object. It's a very scary scenario. And you know, there are a lot of people that hope and wish that something could be done and we need something different, and it's verbal, but how do you do that? And what do you do? I've never seen anybody lay it out other than Jacque, and he worked on it all his life. He worked on it, like I said, in all aspects, from behavioral science and testing it out. He joined the Klan, tested out his methods of how to reach people and what they might need to change. And he broke the Klan up in a month and a half and worked with some of the worst kids in New York City. And when I first met him, they were calling him still and thanking him. They became designers and mechanical illustrators, and you know, he taught them a lot of things. So I think we have the direction laid out. Jacque has a tremendous amount of material. He's lectured all his life, and when I met him, he was lecturing 3 days a week, an hour a time in his home. So he did this for many years. We have over 400 lectures of his on all different topics that are very relevant to lay out the direction for a school and for a city in the future as well, where nobody else was doing this in all aspects of society and all aspects of behavior and values and technically. So we've been archiving Jacque's work, and since I've known him for 40 years, we've archived over 5,500 drawings. So we have a wealth of information, and I think we're very lucky to have that. There's a lot to do to start implementing it and talking to people about it.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. You guys have your work cut out for you. I must just say, I myself am a designer and a builder and a creative person. as I said, we've created this network, Conscious Consumer Network, which is completely different to anything else out there, totally dedicated to free and independent media, and no one has yet been able to replicate it. Yet
Right.
the technologies which have integrated to work together are available. Just people haven't worked how to integrate it together. And the other thing I found with groundbreaking projects, this is very interesting, is that it's not that the technology does not exist to create a better world. What we find is it is easier to find and to build the technology to create a better world than it is to find the people to work together on implementing this technology.
She said that the technology is out there. They've created a huge network for showing it's media. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a television network.
Sure. Oh, great. That's great. You have lots of things you can show if you'd like. But the problem, the technology's out there. It's really hard to get the people to implement this.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, this is true.
Yeah. We find that we have more of a challenge getting people to work together to implement this stuff, to getting people to agree on what needs to be done to get things sorted is, for me, the biggest challenge. It's not that we don't have the solutions, it's the people that are the issue.
Yeah. We have the same thing, and we really have to re-educate them on behaviors and getting along, and then, you know, just like Jacque always says, just stick to the Venus Project. Just keep working toward the Venus Project. You know, you give people a direction to work toward and something to work toward. And I know in a lot of the small communities, once people are building together, they get along. But once they stop building, they have their houses and things, and they start bickering because the values are so contradictory. And language is so difficult because people always interpret different words different ways, even though it's the same word. So when you say something, it goes in their heads and comes out very different than what you mean it. So people have to understand that a lot and question and hold things in abeyance before they get upset and try and find out what the other person's talking about.
Exactly. Perspective is everything. But also something, Roxanne, you said, which is very, very true, is that people coming together, working on a project in a community, if they've got a focus, they are less likely to be a conflict. However, just living together for the sake of community is when the conflict starts. There always needs to be a motivating factor, I find, and we have really spent a lot of time touching bases with and connecting with different free-thinking, open-minded communities around the world, and we observe this pattern the entire time. The moment they've gotten themselves to self-sustaining or whatever, that's when the whole thing falls apart. Between the relationships, it's amazing, really.
Well, there is no end goal to what the Venus Project wants to achieve. And I think in learning a different value system, the bickering would disappear as well. Understanding that people raised in different areas have different values, and everybody is perfectly well adjusted for where they're coming from. That they're really, what you learn today, you're not, in other words, you're not born with bigotry, prejudice, anger. You get that from your environment. So if you want to generate a different type of cooperation and a different type of person, you have to redesign the environment to enable people to behave differently.
I can give you an example of that. I went to a group of islands called Tuamutu. That was French territory. And when I got there, the natives, all of them, wore no clothing. It was tropical. And I never saw a male stare at a female body on the island. You understand that?
Yeah.
I went in all their huts, and none of them had pictures of nude women.
Yeah.
There's no basis for it.
They couldn't sell pornography there.
Yeah, exactly. Because
There were no peeping toms. You understand that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Our culture generates our behavior, whether we know it or not. Of course, we feel like it's our own values, but it's not. It's superimposed.
Yes. It's an artificial construct that's projected upon us to mold us into worker bees and, societies running the hamster wheels, being little slaves, and just really pushing an empire that is predicated on war and suffering for profit.
Absolutely.
We say that there's no such thing as beauty. This is man-made. If everybody had a nose a foot long, you'd have surgery done so you look normal. If everybody had a pointed head and two horns, you'd fall in love with them. There's no such thing as beauty. This is made up by man.
And it drives many industries too. They push it in advertisements. So everything, all of your values you get from your movies, your religion, your schools, your parents, the books you read, the games that you play, your subculture.
Yeah.
And they all are there to support this structure of empire that you're talking about. They serve a vested few. There is no such thing as democracy or freedom. You're as free as your purchasing power in this culture.
Yes, yes. One last one for you, Jacque, before I let you go. You often say, my favorite expressions, limitless dimensions of human stupidity. It's one of my favorite. Would you give me some of your best examples?
She said, one last question for you. Her favorite expression is the limitless dimensions of human stupidity. Can you give some examples of that?
Well, we tell people we go to war to bring democracy. That's not the real reason. We go to war because they have resources we need, oil, water, or something. But we don't go to war to bring democracy. Otherwise, there would have been the democracy would exist all over the world by now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's war everywhere.
Yeah.
No, nice talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to speak to you again, Jacque. It really is. And you too, Roxanne. I'm really, really blessed to have had this conversation. You have been my greatest inspiration of my entire life. I myself am like you in terms of we are really pushing the paradigm within the world that we move in and creating new technologies to help empower those people who need free and independent media outlets to get out information that the mainstream media won't cover. So, you guys are where it started for me. I'm just blessed and honored to have spoken to you. Thank you so much. We will do whatever we can to support you, and we look forward to promoting more of your work.
Thank you. We'd love to have you show some of our documentaries and whatever else we have. Check out our website and our YouTube channel. If there's anything you'd like to expose there, we'd be very grateful.
I'll be doing it, and I'll let you know which ones I'm using and when they'll be airing. And if you guys want to promote it your side, you're welcome to do so. I'll send you a press package with all the articles and links and everything. And again, thank you ever so much. You two are amazing, and we must catch up again.
And one other thing, we just had Jacque's centennial celebration. We had over 600 people show, and we had many people who were doing lectures, and we're putting them up 2 a week for the next few weeks. So you can check those as well, if there's anything you'd like to use there.
Thank you so much. And again, happy birthday, Jacque. You're amazing. We've got a huge amount of respect from all the people who I work with. We just love everything that you've created, and we are definitely working towards implementing a resource-based economy.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Let's explore the thinking of Jacque Fresco and the society he'd like to see.
The reason we emphasize machines and technology is to free man to pursue the higher things. Machines ought to do the filthy, repetitious, or the boring jobs. It would take 10 years to change the surface of the earth. To save our environment, our stupidity, our conflict, we've got to reorganize our way of thinking and reconsider our social aims. We must put our mind to this as we do to put a man on the moon.
Like many kids, when I was 6 years old, I dreamed of flying in space. I'm old enough that back then the only astronauts were Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers.
Watch guards will blast them to pieces before they land.
And I went on and became a professional astronomer. I was lucky enough to get selected in the first group of shuttle astronauts. We trained for a long time, and of course you go through many different types of simulators. But when you're actually sitting up there on the rocket, you realize that, hey, this is not the simulator. The whole vehicle is shaking a little bit on the pad. And then you hear this roar down beneath you, and the whole shuttle tilts forward a little bit. And then as it comes back to the vertical position, then all of a sudden, wham, the solid boosters ignite. And there's an incredible vibration and noise. And for the next 2 minutes, there is just so much power that you're sitting on top of. I was just sort of holding on, thinking to myself, whoa, I hope this whole thing holds together. And sure enough, it did. Of course, by that time, looking out the window, the blue sky has already turned to the blackness of space. And I can see in the distance the coast of Africa coming up into view, and I always remember that feeling on my first flight when I realized, wow, you're in space. You see from orbit the sunrises and sunsets 16 times every 24 hours. Flying over the Earth at night, in particular, gives you a real sense of human civilization. Because during the day, you look down and you see the colors of the Earth, you see the forms of the landmass of the continents. There's a lot of beautiful things to see during the day. There's also the view of the impact that humans have had on our planet, and that can be pretty scary. Over the course of 11 years of flying, I watched as the Amazon jungle was continually being deforested. At night, you constantly see agricultural burning all over the world. So you could see harbors being silted up. You could see in Africa how the tree line would go up every year. And of course, we know about global warming and what we're doing to the atmosphere. That's the other thing that you really get a sense of from space, is how thin our atmosphere is. Basically, the idea that we're seeing this environmental damage on the Earth created by humans, but we see it from a cosmic perspective, means that it's just not something that we can ignore. The planet is responding to the presence of humanity.
The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. From ourselves.
For the first time, we have the capability, the technology, and the knowledge to achieve a global society of abundance for all. We cannot continue as we are, or the consequences will surely be dire.
A 2012 UN report states that a global population growth from 7 billion to almost 9 billion is expected by 2040. Demands for resources will rise exponentially. By 2030, requirements for food are projected to rise by 50%, energy by 45%, and water by 30%. We are presently depleting natural resources 50% faster than their planet can renew. At this rate, it is estimated that we'll need 3 more planet Earths to keep up with resource needs as they are today.
What is the 6th extinction? Is it happening right now? What's the cause of it?
What we as human beings are doing to the planet, changing the basic conditions of life very dramatically and very rapidly.
And yet, from environmental disaster to war, our obsolete value systems perpetuate insanity, threatening us on many fronts. Is it the best we can do to just clean up after the fact? Are politicians capable or even competent to manage the world around us?
Speaker, let me explain. The Prime Minister.
Are we simply incapable of anticipating and planning for our future? Are we innately flawed in ways we can't change?
Why not just use firing squad?
We often hear that human nature is fixed.
Only human nature.
And our worst qualities are inborn.
How are they going to stop being criminals?
Oh, nonsense. They were born that way, and there's no use trying to change them.
I think it's difficult to talk about a specific human nature like we talk about fixed or modal action patterns in non-human species, but clearly in humans, learning plays the major role. In fact, I refer to humans as the learning animal because humans learn more than any other animal.
And yet, considering our history of regression, warlike tendencies, jealousies, and hatred, we still have much to learn. One would think it impossible to simply overlook the conditions we're immersed in.
The culture doesn't know any better. They don't know what forces are involved in shaping human behavior. Therefore, they invent their own concept and project their own values into human behavior and say that's human nature. That's where they're wrong.
Right now we have an explosion of technologies in our culture, and I think many people think that technology is going to save us. Certainly technology has made our lives easier in many respects.
Find parking space.
Parking space found.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good.
Drones armed with Hellfire missiles.
How would you like to get paid to spy on your neighbors?
But there's one technology that we don't have that we sorely need if we're going to really change, and that's a technology of behavior. And so the science of behavior needs to be applied like the sciences of physics, chemistry, and biology have been. That's the one missing, ingredient in our culture. And that's the toughest one because it opposes the way that most people think about themselves.
Examining human behavior in the same manner as any other physical phenomenon will enable us to understand the factors responsible for shaping our attitudes and our conduct.
All natural scientists assume that their subject matters are lawful and orderly. I mean, if they're not, then you can't do science. Behavioral scientists assume that human behavior and the behavior of other organisms is also lawful and orderly. To not assume that means that you accept that human behavior is somehow separate from the rest of nature. We don't make that assumption. We make the assumption that human behavior is part of nature.
Human behavior is just as lawful as everything else.
The sunflower does not turn to the sun. The sun makes it turn by pulling in membranes. A sailboat cannot sail. The wind moves it. Plants can't grow. They are shoved by sunshine, soil, temperature, all kinds of things. All things are shoved by something else. All people are acted upon by other things. Remember, your mother said cup, table, light, papa, mama, over and over again until you did the same thing. Even race hatred is learned.
Awakened as the ideals of intolerance and racial superiority are taught to succeeding generations.
You can be brought up to hate Afro-Americans. You can be brought up to hate Jews, Swedes, all kinds of people.
I hate Filipinos. I hate Mexicans. I hate them all.
We can raise a Jewish boy in a Nazi culture and becomes a good Nazi.
Mechanical processes are based upon many interacting systems.
What you got there, son?
A plane. What makes it fly? Is it the propeller?
Well, the propeller's not going to turn unless you have the motor, right?
So, it's the motor?
But the motor needs fuel.
So I'm guessing it's the fuel that makes it fly.
Almost, but if you don't have the spark plugs and the oxygen, the fuel's not going to burn.
So it's spark plugs and oxygen?
Well, you would think so, but actually, even with all that working, if you don't have the wings and the control surfaces to give it lift, it'll never get off the ground.
So it's the wings and control surfaces that make it fly?
Actually, it's all the above, son. It's a complicated machine, so it needs all these things working together to make the plane fly. That's a lot like other technologies and even human behavior.
So it's all those things that make it fly?
Exactly, kiddo, exactly.
Just like mechanical systems, our behavior has no single cause.
God gives people good blood and bad blood, and there's an end to it.
Our behavior is generated by the many interacting variables that we encounter.
The environment can never be the same for any two individuals. And that really counters claims that people make when they say, well, you know, I have 3 children and they were all raised in the same environment, but they all turned out so different. Well, by that definition, the same environment refers to the house they lived in or the parents they had.
There's no such thing as the same environment. If you have 2 kids, one is 4 years old and you play with them, and the 7-year-old is standing there with her lower lip, you say, what's the matter? The kid goes like that. And then when you're making jealousy and envy, that's where it comes from.
But from a scientific perspective, the environment really consists of the moment-to-moment interactions between your behavior and those events, both inside and outside you. So the environment is in constant flux.
You put the young kid on your lap and the older kid, say, I love you both. You never play with any one kid or have a favorite. You say, you can go to a movie, but you can't because you didn't do your homework. When she falls down the stairs, you have a grin on your face. You know what I mean? Not that you're bad, but you feel you've been mistreated.
Even our concepts of aesthetics and beauty are often attributed to an intrinsic quality. But closer investigation reveals that these perceptions vary greatly from place to place and throughout history.
I think notions of aesthetics and beauty are for the most part learned. I mean, all you have to do are cross-cultural examinations of what people consider to be attractive and beautiful, and you'll find that they differ widely from culture to culture, and sometimes they differ widely within the same culture.
There's people who wear brass rings around their neck. They stretch their neck. If you took those rings away, the head would fall over, and they call that beauty. On some of the islands I went to visit, if the girl had a buttocks that stuck way out, that was beautiful. The other girls were nothing.
But even a girl might find herself shut up in a cage until she's put on those 265 pounds that make her almost, but not quite eligible for marriage in her country.
I know there are suggestions that there are genetic contributions to what we think is beautiful, but I think the most parsimonious explanation we can have for what constitutes beauty to a given individual has to come from that individual's environment, the culture they're raised in.
If everybody had a nose a foot long, you'd have surgery done. There is no such thing as beauty. It's all projection. If you marry the most beautiful girl in the world, and she turns out to be a pain in the butt, that face becomes ugly to you.
Some researchers are posing that genes, rather than upbringing, determine if someone might become a criminal and even a murderer.
If you ask people to tell you what determines whether they become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever profession, most people will agree that it has to do with your upbringing. You know, the influences from your parents, from teachers, from others, and not genes. Genes don't determine that you become a lawyer or a doctor.
Genes don't give us a value system or a process level by which we operate.
Well, genes don't shape our behavior. The genes themselves were shaped by our evolutionary history, but our behavior alone is squarely shaped by the environment that we're exposed to.
Behavior does not occur in a vacuum. It is always dependent on considerable environmental input.
I wanted to know whether men have a natural attitude toward women or do they learn it. So I went to some island years ago. But the interesting thing about the islands is they wore no clothing. And I never saw a male stare at the female body. Children swim nude when they're babies, boys and girls together. There was no peeping toms on the island. There was no pictures of nude women up on the wall in their huts, because it was a normal thing to be nude. They said to the girl, "Me like you," and they stroked them from the top of the head all the way down. But they didn't go for the breasts. Men go for women's breasts in this country because they're taught, hey, get a load of that chick.
And whose fault is it? It's not the Democrats' fault.
And it's all Obama's fault.
Of course, the traditional notion, which is one that gives the individual personal responsibility and autonomy, is one that gives the individual credit for his or her behavior, and also, on the other hand, blames the individual for his or her behavior.
Blaming people for their behavior is one of the most detrimental things of our so-called advanced culture. Their behavior is shaped by the culture they're brought up in.
And of course, that's built upon or based upon an assumption that we are free and we freely choose our behavior. But a scientific perspective actually takes the opposite viewpoint. The scientific perspective is a determinist one, which suggests that our behavior is lawful and orderly. Our behavior is caused.
There's no serial killer that doesn't have a background that made him that way. Every gangster, every New York gangster is made that way by associating with people like that.
Our social and legal systems blame and punish the individual. Yet these attempts to modify conduct by punitive means ignores the person's background and surroundings, which shape that behavior to begin with.
From old-school prison gangs to disruptive street gangs, it's a dangerous mix for staff and inmates alike.
Research shows that learning also changes the physical and chemical structure of the brain. Obviously, there are many contributing factors, but genes play a small role in comparison to the effects of the overall environment on how we learn.
No Chinese baby was ever born speaking Chinese. Did you know that? They had to go to school to learn the language. No French baby was ever born speaking French. No matter how many years the parents spoke French, they have to learn it.
Our cerebral cortex is really built on plasticity. Our behavior is very malleable and very adaptive. We're the most adaptive creature on the planet. And if you look at the history of humankind on the planet, you can see that we've learned to adapt to every single environment on the planet.
The only difference between a preacher and a thief is the environment they're reared in.
We don't come to our own conclusions without any outside influences. We don't change our minds. Our minds are changed by events.
Heard about them, right, brothers?
No.
They say they want to build themselves a flying machine.
They ain't never gonna be no flying machine. If God wanted them to fly, he would give them wings.
Our minds are changed by events.
I changed my mind.
Yeah, me too.
If you're born with a brain that's more effective, faster than the average brain, you become a fascist faster if you're brought up in a fascist environment. A good brain cannot describe that which is significant. A brain has no mechanism of discrimination. Only experimental evidence determines that.
If the surroundings that establish our values remain unaltered, in spite of the urgings of poets, priests, and politicians, the same behavior and values will persist.
If you tell people that you're not the fish in a certain area, if you don't provide food for those people and the means of living, they will violate those laws. All laws have to coincide with the nature of the physical world. But it isn't the law that prevents crime. It's if you meet the conditions.
These days, rhino poachers come by helicopter, armed with powerful tranquilizers and a chainsaw. Rhino horn is now worth more than gold.
If people are unemployed, they will do whatever they have to do to feed their family. So if you make a law and say that you're not to steal food, they will steal food if that serves their family needs. Any law that's made by man that doesn't fit the circumstances of reality will be violated.
Higher ideals and aspirations that people hope for can't be realized when there is deprivation and war.
If you want to go bomb somebody, there's remarkably little discussion about how much it might cost, but when you have a discussion about whether or not we can assist people who are suffering, then suddenly we become very, cost conscious.
No culture evaluates human behavior in this way. If they did, they would question, what is it that generates greed, bigotry, inequities, and war?
They bring you up with the values that put them in power.
Unfortunately, all societies to date have indoctrinated people toward values that perpetuate those in power.
So, let's investigate the key factors governing the lives of people and nations. Money and the values, behaviors, and consequences it produces.
Time and sales data. Split-second stats.
As a remnant of antiquity, money now largely serves as a mechanism of corruption, deprivation, and control in the hands of a few.
It's corrupted everything. I mean, every institution that we live in is corrupted by money. What's fascinating to me is that we can become enslaved by something that we've created. Not physically, but just mentally enslaved by a notion that was invented by humanity. It is archaic because I think we've grown past what money can do.
It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and money system, or if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford, Ford Motor Company.
In a desperate attempt to survive, many work multiple jobs. They may steal, lie, or embezzle.
So stress-producing that the average person worries about rent, losing their job, can't pay off the house.
On a bigger scale, the profit motive creates a ruthless cycle of devastation. Illness, pollution, and war are accepted as normal.
You have sort of a wartime economy that begins to be self-perpetuating, and you have powerful people inside of a power vacuum, really, who see it as in their interest to perpetuate the conflict.
But it does benefit the few at the top who live parasitically by the manipulation and control of money.
The banking system right now is effectively enslaving individuals, enslaving students, enslaving institutions, and sucking resources from them.
They set it up so that there would be private central banks that could charge everybody interest on the currency and allow themselves to get rich without having to do anything. Who's been doing all of this? It's a group of bankers, the Federal Reserve System. That's a private system.
The Fed is a private bank owned by private stockholders. Do not let the name Federal fool you.
In 1913, which is when Woodrow Wilson allowed the Federal Reserve System legislation to be passed, most of the Congress people had gone home.
This legislation turned the central bank system of the United States over to the Federal Reserve Board, making them the only group that could issue Federal Reserve notes or U.S. dollars.
President Wilson, he regretted that. He said that he had just sold this country downstream.
A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. A government by the opinion and the duress of small groups of dominant men. President Woodrow Wilson, 1916.
It's a fiat system that we operate under, and it's actually someone punching numbers on a computer somewhere. That is how we manufacture money today.
There's nothing backing it, there's nothing behind it.
When government spends more than it collects in taxes and needs money, it does not print its own money, but borrows from the Federal Reserve in exchange for U.S. bonds, which the Fed provides at interest. When people and corporations want money, they go to banks as well. The system is rigged. If a bank buys a $100 bond, the bank gets to lend out 10 times that amount, or $1,000. They created the extra funds from nothing. No money, gold, or anything to back it up. The bank also gets back the loans with interest for all the money lent. Money is created this way from the simple signature of a borrower with the promise to pay it back. And to make matters worse, very often people are paying the amount back many times over due to the interest. This is the process by which individuals, companies, and governments acquire money. It is respectably referred to as fractional reserve lending and is used globally by most other banking systems, keeping people and entire nations in perpetual debt.
So if you just keep printing dollars with no backing, at a certain point, people lose confidence in the currency, and that's what's happened.
The banking system right now is in the business of manufacturing risk by creating debt for individuals and people. And so there is the risk that those people will not pay that debt back. But the liabilities for the risk have been and continue to be assigned to the U.S. taxpayer in the U.S. currency.
We're now sitting in a situation where the world's currencies are about to crash. Nobody knows how long it's going to take, but the Federal Reserve System has been printing dollars like there's no tomorrow.
You have what is effectively a criminal enterprise based on the manipulation of people's attention, resources, and time in order to extract value from them.
They're stealing money from us that way. They're stealing the result of our efforts and our labor.
And that is something that has grown as a cancer on our society.
These bankers are all part of a system called the Bank for International Settlements.
Most people, even in business and banking, don't understand this bank and its role as the BIS.
They own 40% of the assets of the 43,000 companies that are traded on the capital markets.
The bank runs itself. It has a board of directors which is composed of 15 governors of central banks from around the world.
And they pull down 60% of the annual earnings. They bought up all our media, and that media is hoodwinking citizens.
The media has morphed into just peddling the corporate interests of the money masters that control the political establishment. There's about 118 boards of directors that sit on these 5 giant media corporations. And they all serve different boards of Monsanto to weapons to food. So when you have all these interests bleeding together, it's that much harder to differentiate what interests you're seeing laid out in the mainstream media.
Fair, balanced.
If you want to understand power, you have to understand who nominates candidates, not understand who votes for candidates. Our system is not a democracy. The percentage of our population that participates in the nomination process is literally less than 5% of the population, and really less than 1% of the population. If I was in control of the nominating process of everything that everybody ate, and I always nominated cheeseburgers or fried chicken, and I told you that it was a democracy and you could eat anything you want as long as it was a cheeseburger or fried chicken, would that be a democracy? I could sell it to you as a democracy because I don't decide whether you eat cheeseburgers or fried chicken. You get to vote in a very large and well-publicized election as to whether we're going with fried chicken or cheeseburgers. And people organize into very tribal groups, being very anti-fried chicken and very pro-cheeseburger, or they'll explain to you exactly why cheeseburgers are going to be the end of the world and why fried chicken's going to save you.
Those who can afford it hire lobbyists who essentially buy politicians. Most of the time, either party will suit their needs.
Definition of a lobbyist in the United States is someone who advocates for someone else and is getting paid for it.
The laws then enacted are quite often written by the corporations to benefit themselves.
Professor Thurber sees an underground explosion in lobbying and estimates the industry actually brings in more than $9 billion a year, exceeded only by tourism and government.
The reason that we aren't changing things right now is the banks have lobbyists in Washington in numbers I've never seen.
Lobbyists are strictly there to buy access. They are not there to enhance the democratic process. Families and working people just don't have that kind of representation, power, or influence to look after their needs.
They've designed the system to reinforce and, in a sense, finance themselves based off of special interests.
Everything that was around in 2007, 2008 that we get so scared about, the mortgage-backed securities, the credit default swaps, the other derivatives, they still exist. They absolutely do. And yes, there's higher capital requirements for the banks, so they can't be as leveraged, but those are not that high.
And if we don't have a media that's providing who's really like writing these bills and passing this legislation and what it's all for and who it serves, then we're living in an illusion.
Well, I think that generally the laws in this country are written by the wealthy and the powerful, because I think by definition that's who controls the legislatures and the commanding heights of the power system in this country.
And that's a scary reality, because you can pay your way into having laws implemented that serve you and your corporation as you would like them to serve.
The complete impunity that corporations have to operate unabated and pollute the entire planet.
A major spill of toxic coal ash is raising questions again about the safety of water and the government regulators overseeing industry.
There's zero accountability. I mean, other than slap on the wrist of a couple fines here and then. I mean, slave labor to the exploitation of resources on the planet.
The slap on the wrist of industries that pollute, cut corners, and violate policies will continue as long as it's profitable to do so.
JP Morgan paid $13 billion in fines last year. If you have that much money in order to just pay fines, and they put away $19 billion for paying fines.
JP Morgan is paying $410 million to settle charges with the government, but JP Morgan is not admitting any wrongdoing.
Goldman Sachs settled early on in this case for $550 million without admitting wrongdoing. UBS has agreed to pay about $50 million. Under the terms of the settlement, UBS did not admit any wrongdoing.
Well, I think that people commit the crimes that they're in a social position to commit. I think it was Bertolt Brecht that asked, which is a greater crime, to rob a bank or to own one? And I think as we've seen from everything from the savings and loan scandals to the Wall Street meltdown, that all too often the owners of the banks are frequently looting the institutions that employ them. They commit all manner of illegal acts, and yet they're very rarely prosecuted for them. And throughout history, there's been very little, I think, pretense that the government has always acted as an agent for the wealthy class.
Yes, there might be idealistic politicians that got into the game to change the world, but if they're good, any good at their job, they're no longer changing the world. They're serving the interests of their donors if they want to rise in the world of politics.
They say, write your congressman. Who the hell is this jackass that you have to write? He should be at the forefront of technology and knowledge. You don't have to write him. I'm sure most of you have flown in airliners. You don't have to write the pilot, say you're flying at an angle. Straighten out, God damn it. He knows his business. That's how he got the job. The people in Washington are lawyers and businessmen and can solve no problems.
If the bottom line and it's a profit-driven world, then those interests are going to be served first and everything is going to be secondary. And that's the sad reality of it.
There is no value system that's put out there that is actually beneficial to humanity because it's based on consumerism and profit making.
And we use artificial pumping in animals to make them grow faster. So if you can multiply the cells of the chicken faster, you can sell it sooner. But does that have an effect on the human body? They don't worry about it. They worry about the sale of chickens.
Wealth is going to the rich faster than any other time in history.
The success of the industrialized world has been dependent on the failure and the lack of development of the developing world. I mean, the reason that they're stifled is because they are indebted to the first world. We wouldn't be prospering if it weren't for the labor that's going on and the indentured servitude that's going on in the entire developing country. And so that's the power dynamic can never change in that respect because it's literally dependent on it being that way.
The dirty and dangerous work done by children.
The jobs down in the pits are typically reserved for teenagers with only tree limbs to brace the mine walls. The risk to them is real.
Rich governments like to say they're helping poor countries develop. But who's developing who here? Each year, poor countries are paying about $600 billion in debt service to rich countries on loans that have already been paid off many times over. And then there's the money that poor countries lose from trade rules imposed by rich countries. Altogether, that's more than $2 trillion every year.
Money systems have existed for centuries, and whether we realize it or not, have always been used to control behavior by limiting the purchasing power of the majority of people. One example of this is the criminal justice system.
Many proclaim prisons don't work, but ultimately, prisons are a resounding success as a tool for social control to safeguard the political and economic established system.
If you hire people whose only expertise is caging people to try to fix social problems, you're not going to get a very good solution. But I think that they're very good at caging people, and I think that's why mass incarceration has been a huge success for the ruling class in this country. The United States is really number one in a lot of things, and I think the biggest thing that we can say that we're number one in is how many people we lock up. And the United States has roughly 5% of the world's population, but we've got 25% of the world's prisoners. China has 4 times as many people as the United States does and half as many prisoners. The United States has more prisoners than the Soviet Union did at the height of the purges and the collectivization in the 1930s and the infamous Soviet Gulag.
Poverty is a vicious cycle, rarely escaped by the poor. Studies found that scarcity can reduce mental capacity and cognitive performance. In children, it affects their brain development and memory. Additionally, the poor are often forced to live in areas of low air quality.
Far from being a problem for only the poor, all areas of the socioeconomic spectrum suffer when our air, food, and water are polluted by fossil fuel emissions and radiation from nuclear accidents.
The current energy infrastructure results in about 2.5 to 4 million deaths per year worldwide from respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, and complications from asthma.
We're in downtown Beijing and the pollution readings have once again gone off the charts. Readings are around 25 times World Health Organization standards.
Including 50 to 100,000 deaths per year in the United States and 16,000 alone in California.
The economic system that we're living in today is destroying the planet because it is based on an unsustainable model. We're seeing proof of that right now.
The current energy infrastructure, which has been going on for a long time, has resulted in the accumulation of greenhouse gases and particles that cause warming of the Earth's climate. And the Earth's climate is warming at a rate faster than any time since deglaciation from the last ice age. In addition, higher CO2 levels, CO2 is an acid, it dissolves in water, becomes carbonic acid, and has resulted in the acidifications of the oceans, and this is destroying coral reefs.
We have to realize our planet does have a certain amount of regenerative power, and there's no question that we've been through numerous worldwide extinctions. We have fossil records of that, and the Earth has recovered. There is a limiting carrying capacity, though.
There are many additional impacts of global warming. Sea level rise is a very big concern. For example, right now there is about 65 to 70 meters of sea level stored in ice, mostly in the Antarctic, but also in glaciers in Greenland and also sea ice in the Arctic and other places. The temperature's warm enough that we melt all this ice. That means the sea levels will rise 65 to 70 meters, and that will cover 7% of all the world's land and result in all this is along the coast where most people in the world live. This will cause a significant disaster. We're also seeing enhanced storminess, increased intensity of hurricanes, and greater extremes of weather associated with global warming. So there are significant problems associated with this, and these are all tied back to the emissions from coal, oil, and gas combustion that have been occurring since the Industrial Revolution that started in the mid to late 1700s.
It is probable that war itself could be our undoing, let alone the environment. Our brutal, competitive behaviors are not human nature, but simply a result of scarcity, making us all competitors in the fight to attain what we need to survive. And while scarcity is naturally occurring, it's also intentional in industries and governments for profit and national interest. As long as nations are immersed in scarcity, we will continue to have conflicts between people. Crimes, murder, and other violence, to all-out war, the ultimate expressions of human stupidity.
The ground shook in the U.S. bombardment.
Bomb the heck out of them.
These behaviors must be surpassed if we wish to survive.
The bombs on!
That's the best recruiting tool for Al-Qaeda. This guarantees the cycle of violence will go on.
And with our technological ability to provide for all, we must take steps towards a different approach. Or the endless cycle of booms, busts, and war will continue.
Oh, no! Peace in our time! Wait a minute, yeah.
Nobody, including the United, and most of all the United States, goes to war to liberate or spread democracy. The only incentive on a practical level to go to war is to acquire resources. In the United States case, it frequently is either energy resources, shall I say, supporting political alliances to preserve access to energy resources.
Smedley Butler, a U.S. Marine Corps General Major who was the most decorated Marine at the time of his death, stated it well when he wrote,
I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico safe for American oil interests. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interest. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies. In China, I helped see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best that he could do was operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. War is a racket. It always has been. A few profit and the many pay. But there is a way to stop it. You can end it by disarmament conferences. It can be smashed effectively only by taking the profit out of war.
Our universities today are better equipped than ever. Best microscopes, the best scientific equipment, and the bombs are getting worse. The wars are getting worse. Killing is getting worse. You don't need to kill people, bomb cities. There's something wrong with our culture, very wrong.
To blame any individual or corporation does not get at the root causes of the problems. The structure of our socio-economic system itself has everyone out to meet their own needs, creating a predatory, competitive environment. Attempting to find solutions to the monumental problems within our present society will only serve as temporary patchwork, prolonging what is quickly becoming an obsolete system. Now more than ever, a sustainable civilization is possible, and furthermore, essential. Our social designs, language, and values have evolved from ages ago. The reality of scarcity in earlier times shaped our behaviors and remains deeply entrenched in all cultures today. The history of civilization is a story of change, and this includes our social systems as well.
Our earliest enlightenments were but stepping stones in the sequential development to our present science and technology, which could now produce and distribute abundance to everyone.
There's no question that many jobs simply aren't coming back, but probably the biggest single driver of that is the way technology is racing ahead. If we continue on current paths, the next 10 years will be even more disruptive than the last 10 years because the technology is accelerating faster.
If you keep laying off people and putting in machines, which is happening in the auto industry, they pick up the whole car and turn around, shove the engine in, and moving people out. There comes a time when millions won't have the purchasing power to buy cars. That's when the system collapses.
But all of our growth is associated with increased consumption, increased use of energy and other resources. And when you ask economists, well, what's the alternative that enables us to continue to be prosperous without destroying the natural environment on which we depend? And they don't seem to have an answer for that.
There's no solution within the present day type society.
The Venus Project proposes a workable alternative.
The aim of the Venus Project is to secure, protect, and assure a more humane world for all through the application of technology and cybernetics with human and environmental concern.
People need information to be able to move into the future intelligently. Without information, there's no way you can develop a sustainable culture. It can't be done politically because the problems are technical. If you succeeded in arranging for the most ethical people in the world of the highest morality and put them in government, When your lights fail in your house, you need an electrician. When the dams don't generate enough electricity, you don't need a highly moral politician. You need an electrical engineer. So our problems in the world can be solved by technical people.
What science does provide for us is a great deal of information about the implications of the different options we have. So science helps us make better decisions by informing those decisions. And that's why it's a shame to turn away from science in the public arena.
Science is not an emotional way, not a wishful thinking way, but a rational way of seeing what the connections are. That's what science is about. How could that not apply to everything?
Well, the scientific method, quite simply, is a process by which you can try and distinguish what accurately describes the universe from what doesn't. It involves several steps. Often, of course, you make some supposition or prediction about what phenomena might result based on some theory. But then, most importantly, use empirical data, testing. You test your idea in a way that's falsifiable.
When they said to scientists, can you put a man on the moon? The answer was, I don't know. They go, how do you find out? Well, we have to put a guy in a centrifuge and spin him and see when he conks out. Then we know how fast the rocket can go. It can't start out at 7 miles a second. The guy had flattened out. After they try all these, then they say, this is what we have to do to get a man on the moon.
You have to perform additional tests that are more selective to determine, in fact, how accurate your idea is. And science continues by the process of continual testing your ideas.
If you're going to get into nature, you're going to get into the rules by which nature operates. And it does operate by very specific rules, which means it's predictable. And so what's science? For me, it's more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking.
Now, language itself is subject to interpretation. When you say something, it goes through my filters and comes out a little different than what you mean. Now, if you had that in the scientific world, engineering world, when engineers talk to each other, they use physical reference for their language. If they all interpreted what they think the other guy meant, you couldn't build bridges, they'd collapse. So in medicine, when a doctor says hemostat, the nurse doesn't hand him a towel, she hands him a hemostat. So that language is very precise.
The thing about science is it's independent of culture, religion, language, everything. That's why scientists from around the world can work together. We all speak the same language.
They're talking specifically. A wonderful thing about a blueprint, if you give a blueprint of an automobile to Italy, China, France, they all turn out the same automobile because it has uniform interpretation.
I was just giving a lecture about two very important results which vastly disagree. What did the two groups do that vastly disagreed? They decided to work together. And their interest was determining what nature tells us, not what they wanted to be true.
There's no Chinese way of building airplanes. There's a mathematical way.
Oddly enough, we've never applied the methods of science and engineering on a global scale to achieve a more just and equitable social arrangement. Our failure to do so leaves us continuously on the brink of oblivion.
Scientists were never asked to design a society without automobile accidents. They were never asked to design a city that's self-sufficient. You know, you took the Manhattan Project, they were supported, so they built the atom bomb. We're working on the wrong things. The society I'm talking about is global cooperation, where all the nations work toward improving the lot of humankind. Now, why do that? Because the smarter people are, the richer and more secure everybody is. But in the future, when you join all the nations together, and they can see the advantage of sharing all the Earth's resources and all the knowledge by all nations, once they realize that advantage, they will join together. If they do not, they'll kill each other.
That's what endless warfare has led to. Brigandage. What else could happen? But we, who are all that are left of the old engineers and mechanics, have pledged ourselves to salvage the world. We're the last trustees of civilization when everything else has failed.
If our planet had a common catastrophic threat, such as a large meteor heading toward the Earth, nations would unite and call upon science and technology to solve the pending catastrophe. Border disputes would cease. Bankers, lawyers, and businessmen would be unable to solve the problem. Resources would be harnessed without cost or profit. Today we face many common threats, far beyond national boundaries.
In the world today, we have enough resources to solve most human problems. We can build cities, hospitals all over the world if we use resources. But if you conscripted all the money in the world, there's not enough money to build hospitals and housing all over the world and finance the education of students. But we do have enough teachers and enough buildings we can use for universities. We have the resources. Money is an interference because it limits our ability and it limits our dreams.
Imagine the possibilities of an unprecedented mobilization of scientific and technical alliances toward problem solving without the interference of money or politics to initiate global unification and restoration.
This could easily enable a high standard of living for all. This is what Jacque Fresco had in mind when he proposed a resource-based economy.
If our planet ran out of resources, no matter how much gold or money or possessions you had, you could not survive. Our entire survival is based upon resources.
Growing up in the Great Depression in the early 1930s in New York City was a catalyst for his life's work. Jacque explored many different social alternatives during that time, but all seemed insufficient. He rejected the obsolete teaching methods of the time and was granted special privileges by his principal. He read books that furthered his interest in human behavior and social change. His early research with training and observing animals led him to similar findings with people as well. He concluded the environment shapes our values, our identity, and generates our behavior. Fresco witnessed great suffering and scarcity, even though Earth was abundant with resources. He saw it was the rules of the game we play by that were at fault.
Jacque started with a lot of technical things when he was very young, and what gave him incentive for that, some of the first designs, was that his younger cousin cut his fingers in a metal fan. So Jacque came up with a fabric fan. He was just a little kid, and he took it to the fan company, and they said, "Oh, nice idea, kid, but it's not practical." And then a couple months later, they came out with it. This was his first introduction to the free enterprise system. It's not free and it's not enterprising.
Fresco grasped the necessity to develop an entirely new social design, which integrates the best of science and technology dedicated toward human and environmental concern.
To accomplish this holistic approach, Fresco studied and worked in a wide range of fields, such as architecture, transportation, medicine, behavioral sciences, industrial design, and more. For most of his life, he has lectured, written books, designed and produced models and media to introduce methods that could work for all instead of only a few individuals.
Sometimes when you talk about a new kind of world, it frightens people. They figure, well, gee, everything is technical. What about the human aspect? And I had to devise models and make buildings and homes to show people what kind of home they might live in the future. I really don't know what the future will be like, but there are possible alternatives, thousands of different alternatives.
Fresco and co-founder Roxanne Meadows built the experimental structures to test and illustrate his designs and provide a research center from which to continue furthering the aims and proposals.
We moved here in about 1980, and this was all flat tomato patch, most of it. We got 10 acres and another 10 acres. Jacque wanted an island in the Caribbean, which was $800,000, and we couldn't afford it, so we settled on $1,000 an acre here in Venus. So we made it look like a tropical island. We planted hundreds of palm trees and fruit trees and dug the waterways. And then the animals came. You know, we have deer, lots of alligators, bear, fox, raccoons. So it's really living in harmony with nature here. This is kind of an example of what the outskirts of Jacque City would be like. There would be one building very close to another building, but there's so many trees in between that it looks like you're living in a forest.
So what the Venus Project really wants is to unify all the nations of the world toward common goals, such as clean air, clean water, non-contaminated food, and make that available to everyone. What is really needed is the intelligent management of the Earth's resources. A resource-based economy is based on the carrying capacity of the Earth and its resources. If you don't work in terms of existing resources, you're working in some metaphysical plane. In a resource-based economy, all resources would become the common heritage of all the world's people, and access to the necessities of life would be for all the world's people. There would be no more monetary systems or trade, barter, or any other system of human servitude.
A resource-based economy allows social advancement and worldwide reconstruction in the shortest time possible.
Under scientific scales of performance, we can provide everybody with more than they need. I'm saying that the average person in this Venus Project will live better than the wealthiest people today.
But first, you take a survey of the Earth's resources. You don't leave it up to the opinion of somebody or a group of people. You find out what you have, and that gives you the parameters of what you can work with. So you find out where your technical personnel are, where your water is, where your arable land is, the health of the people and the needs of the people, and you build according to that. That will determine where your hospitals go and everything else.
A resource-based economy operates as a balanced load economy. This means avoiding shortages and overruns, thus optimizing efficiency and conserving energy. There would be no excesses and little waste. It would be balanced to the environmental conditions and human needs. For instance, there would be no houses without people in them, or cargo trains traveling empty or stored in freight yards dependent on the business cycle for their use. This also ensures natural resources are not depleted as in our present system.
Here's where I got the ideas from: the human body. The brain says, if I do all the thinking, I want most of the nutrients. And the lungs would say, just a minute, if I don't oxygenate the blood, you couldn't work as a brain. So the brain says, all right, I'll give you whatever you need. And the liver says, if I don't filter, the brain and the lungs will die. So every organ gets whatever the hell it needs. And so you have a system that works. When you get an infection in your toe, there's no committee meeting, no democracy, where they send the committee to the brain, say there's an infection in the toe. The brain says, we're going to do a 3-month study. By that, your infection's up to your knee.
To achieve the intelligent management of resources, technologies are used to monitor and track goods and services. This is similar to industrial processes of today, but updated to equitably distribute goods and services to all. This is the basis for a total global systems approach.
I can imagine an abundance economy where robots do most of the work, where our food, our clothing, our shelter are created by machines. And I think it's very realistic for us to completely eliminate absolute poverty worldwide, not just in the United States, by the year 2035. Nobody needs to starve ever again. That could be an enormous milestone that is achievable because of technology.
When we computerize everything and start producing things and make things available, it'll be too cheap to monitor.
With the most capable computers, we can arrive at more appropriate decisions on a global scale.
I have no doubt that machines will eventually be assigned more and more decision making. For example, years ago, a pilot would look out of a plane and says, I think I'm about a mile high. But today they have Doppler radar and they know exactly how high they are. So we don't want human guesswork anymore when a machine can do it. So I see the future as using very sophisticated computers that make decisions. Now, how do computers make decisions? They have their tentacles out into transportation, agriculture, so they can tell you when the soil is depleted, when it has less water, because it has sensors built into the soil. The computer will be connected to weather departments, earthquake zones, everything. So I feel that eventually government will become computerized.
Today, the world's fastest computer is in China. The Tianyi supercomputer is capable of 33.86 quadrillion floating point operations per second.
80% of what the world champion in the game of Jeopardy. Well, that same technology can also be used to solve legal problems, to answer questions in call centers, to make medical diagnoses. These are just wondrous technologies that are having enormous implications going forward. Recently, I got a chance to ride in a self-driving car. 10 years ago, I would have said that was impossible, but of course it did happen, and riding down Route 101 in California was a breathtaking experience for me. At first it was a little frightening, then it was a little exhilarating, and ultimately I felt quite comfortable in that car.
Humans have accidents. Google's driverless car has driven 700,000 miles without an accident. Even the best humans have accidents before they get to 700,000 miles.
All of us are beginning to be able to speak to our machines, whether they're cell phones or computers, and have them understand what we're saying. That would have been science fiction a few years ago, but now the machines are able to carry out our instructions and even respond back to us in computer-synthesized voices.
I think 10, 20 years from now, there will be very few areas, maybe none, where human judgment is better than machine judgment.
So the computers will eventually be put in charge of everything except human behavior.
Technology can eliminate critical life or death errors. A machine, instead of humans, fills the prescriptions.
The robot gives a huge amount of confidence because we know that pharmacists and pharmacy technicians are incredibly skilled people, but they're humans and they will occasionally make mistakes. You know, we give something like 3 million doses of drug in 3 months here, so even a 1% error rate is far too high.
And so eventually you're going to get to computerized government, and that's the end of corruption, because they don't have ambition. Computers don't say, I'd like to be president of the world, I want to control people. They don't have a gut reaction.
If utilized in this global systems approach, we could surpass the practice of political decisions based on power and advantage.
And even computer experts are writing books now on the machine takeover. Watch out, they're not going to take over, they're going to be assigned the decision making.
I'm not worried about the machines getting angry and taking over. I'm worrying about people maybe getting angry if we don't figure out an equitable way to use these technologies to create shared prosperity.
The Venus Project proposes ways to achieve this. Interconnected, sustainable cities utilize cyber centers, which coordinate industries, transportation systems, public health care, and the flow of goods and services. These cybernated centers would connect all cities and help with environmental reclamation. In the beginning, interdisciplinary technical teams would manage productivity until even these tasks are automated.
Mega machines directed by AI could excavate canals, construct bridges, viaducts, and dams. Self-erecting structures would be expedient in the construction of industrial plants, apartments, and eventually most of the global infrastructure.
We study all the negative effects before we build anything. So there's a whole group of engineers and computers doing long-term studies of all the negative retroaction.
With the threat of climate change, we may be forced to take large engineering feats. The Venus Project proposes automated canal diggers to bring rising seawaters into below sea level deserts, enabling them to bloom.
The cities would only use clean sources of energy. Some say this is not possible, but even today, Professor Mark Jacobson is demonstrating otherwise.
So our goal is to replace all fossil fuels. There's 30 times more solar available worldwide over land in high solar locations than we need to power the entire world for all purposes in 2030. And there's 7 times more wind than you need to do the same thing. So we are looking to combine all clean renewable energy sources that are available: wind, solar power, geothermal power, hydroelectric tidal power, and wave power. We would need about 4 million large wind turbines to power 50% of the entire world for all purposes. You might say, well, that sounds like a lot. But keep in mind, during World War II, the world produced about 800,000 aircraft in the space of 5 to 6 years, and the US produced 330,000 aircraft in 4 to 5 years. And so that was decades ago, and now we have better technologies and abilities to ramp up production. So it really comes down to willpower. It's not a technological or economic blockade to solving this problem. It's really a social and political blockade.
The first city would be a testing ground for the implementation and further development of these social aims. The first city would be a huge research center, making automated systems for the next city, making the first city better as well. It would be a place where we would disseminate information. We'd have movie studios, we'd be making gaming, computer animation, a lot of different media to get to the public. It would be like a university city. We would have instructions as to what sustainability really means for the future.
The cities of the future are circular, not because I like circles. It's because you only have to design one segment of the system and then reproduce it in pie-shaped sectors, and that would be the most economical way. When you build suburbia, it's spread out, and you have to travel one way to the dentist, the other way for shopping, another way to the doctor. The system is self-contained. There are wind generators. All the rooftops are solar generated. All of the garbage and waste is recycled under the ground, underneath these roadways. All of the roadways contain piping running up and back, and we use all that hot water to operate the air conditioning and the needs of the city. Now these are where the residential district is. If you work in the medical center, you can live here if you choose to. So this is essentially a collection of variations in houses. Your house will vary to suit your needs.
Fresco's designs are a showcase for the harmonious coexistence of nature and technology.
Now, some people don't like living in individual houses. They prefer living in apartments because there's a gymnasium, drama group, discussion group, recreation of all kinds. So the skyscraper in the future will offer more of the amenities.
So this is your recreational belt. There'd be art centers, music centers, recreational areas.
These are bicycle paths. There are tennis courts, and these are golf courses. But the golf courses contain a clubhouse with all the golf clubs. So you don't have to bring anything out to the golf course. You stay there, play golf. When you're through, you leave your clubs there. These are access buildings where anyone can access books, a violin, musical instrument, anything that they want is free and available.
These are your research centers. Everything studied in these areas is to improve your standard of living and everybody else there. There would be no lawyers, no bankers, no ad agencies, no insurance people, no salespeople. Without money, you don't need any of those things. So you could go right into solving the problems that all of us have. That's what we'd be working on. Today, we're fighting over people who have different values, and we're fighting over scarce resources. In the future, you won't have to do that. You'd be working cooperatively to improve the standard of living for everyone.
A lot of people think that I want to give people things for nothing, and that's going to spoil people. The fact that you're born in America, you'd have nothing to do with the airplane, the telephone, the railways. It's all here. And you're lucky because you inherited that, just being born here. That doesn't spoil you. So there's really no basis for crime. Since anyone can access anything they need, no one's going to hit you on your head and take your wallet because there's no money in it anymore. The monetary system has been surpassed.
And when we have that kind of abundance economy, most of us will be able to spend most of our time doing the things we enjoy doing. The kinds of things that you might have seen the Athenians do during their golden age. They had human slaves take care of their basic needs. We can do it with robots.
Amazing. And what would you suggest the cooks and housewives of the world do with all that extra time?
There's an island called Isle of Man. On that island, there's a stream down below, and the women wear a harness. And they go down, they get 2 buckets of water and climb up to their home up there where they boil and cook food. The women have to skin animals and get the animal fat out to operate their lamps. And if someone said to the women, someday you'll turn a gadget and water will flow at whatever speed you want, without you having going down to the river. And someday you'll press a button and the lights will go on. And you won't have to skin animal fat. And the woman says, yes, but what will women do? People will get engaged in how to live, how to relate, to travel, scuba diving, restoring the reefs of the oceans that we damage, cleaning the ocean and the atmosphere. So much we don't know. And you go back to school free of charge, and every city will be a university city where you're updated on what's new.
We would re-examine everything, from our social arrangements and building processes to our value system. Let's explore how this new social concept would work within a resource-based economy. It's not just architecture, it's a way of thinking.
We still have neural lag. It's hard for us to step into the future without dragging some of the past. We won't make the history books of the future. We are that ignorant. Not in technology. We're doing fine in computers, electronics, but the human value system is not moving fast enough. I would say that people would be much more productive, much more humane, much happier people. That is the question. Will people be happier with new technology? No, not new technology alone, but with a value system and new technology. In many instances, we ask people for their opinion. Do you think man will ever get to the moon? They may say, maybe 10,000 years from now. Instead of saying, I don't know enough about that to give you a sensible answer. That's the way you talk. But they have opinions about everything. There'll always be war, there always has been war, because man is greedy. That's what a repeat or a loop of what they've heard in the past.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
People are reinforced in this culture to be greedy. The more you have, the more you abuse other people. In order to get what you have, you're looked upon as being successful. You admire the people with money that have those things. And they usually get it off other people's backs that they abuse terribly. So you're not born being greedy.
People think that you can't change human nature. If you couldn't change it, we'd still be living in caves. So obviously we're undergoing change. So human nature is not fixed. And greed is brought about by scarcity or lack of resources.
Well, there are some animals that are very docile. The cows on the next field, they wouldn't hurt each other at all. But when we approach them with oranges, because there's a scarcity of oranges, they start bucking each other. So it's really a matter of scarcity. What the Venus Project is trying to do is eliminate scarcity and produce abundance. And for the first time in history, we can do that because we have the technology to be able to supply people with whatever they need.
Some people believe that there's such a thing as human intelligence. Remember that an intelligent electrical engineer of 75 years ago could not get a job today. So what you once called intelligent was intelligent at that time within that frame of reference. It's an ongoing process. Now, what is the real meaning of intelligence? The ability to extract significant information from any situation. I would say it depends on the next 20 years. We'll know whether there's intelligent life on Earth. Depends on what we do about the environment and what we do about the human problem. Poverty, hunger in the world, sickness, and waste of resources. If we learn how to manage the Earth's resources intelligently, we can overcome most of the problems in relatively short time. Creativity is taking known systems and putting together in unique ways and adding few things to improve the product. That goes for music, art, drawings, invention. But if you study the history of invention, you will see a relationship and tie of all these variables. I think that's part of the propaganda of each system that tells people that the financial gain is the main motivation in people. It is the people interested in money, but there are other people that are motivated by other interests, medical research. People devote their lives to it. There are people that work real hard and save up money and go to Africa and spend all their time trying to help people. They're not motivated by money. And I am suspicious of people that are only motivated by money.
And a $40,000 gold fucking watch.
It's not a healthy motivation. If you want to know what kills incentive, is you give people the minimum amount of money, minimum vacation, hard, dirty work with no future. A man that washes dishes in a restaurant, they keep bringing a new pile in every 20 minutes, and he sees no out. He can never buy a home or own a car. He doesn't own enough. So what incentive is that? But he has to wash the dishes because he got 2 kids, he's got to feed them, and that's not good for mental health at all. What will motivate people? A world without war, poverty, hunger, loss of employment, loss of income. Your incentives and options are tremendous. Thousands of different things to do now that you got your food and housing and education. Now you go to work on solving not all problems, but all the problems of that time. So we do it because we are functionally selfish, meaning being selfish for yourself alone is detrimental. But functionally selfish means take care of the environment, share ideas with people, and in that way we all gain. They can see on the news every day that everything they do goes out there to all humanity. So everybody in the world represents an extension to their life rather than everybody selling themselves and making a profit on one another. They now have the time to appreciate what the new world does, and all the films of the future will show them what's happening all over the world and what's new, and that they have free access to what's new because everybody cares about everybody else. I'd like to strike out the word utopia. There's no such thing. It's like designing the best city possible. That's not possible. We can design a far better city, but as time goes on with new invention, it's always in the process of change. Are we civilized? Of course not. It's an ongoing process. When people think, well, your idea is a utopian, that's not a utopian. That's applied technology and efficiency. What we want is an emergent society that's never established, always learning new things, always moving onward toward change, and to help people adjust emotionally and intellectually to expect change, and change for the better. If the environment is structured, it produces what you would call ethical and moral behavior. But if you don't alter the environment, it'll keep producing what you got now. So the environment has to be changed. That means the schools, the things we learn, our language, all of these things have to be updated. I think that people will be ethical to the nature of the world. Ethical not because it says so in a book. They're ethical because it's better for them and better for society. So the new ethics is based upon the carrying capacity of the earth rather than my opinion. Will it be a democracy? It never was a democracy. It's been corrupt all the way back, only it's never been disclosed. Did you vote for the space program? Did you vote for the building of warships? Did you vote for any wars? What the hell do you mean by participatory democracy? It never existed. These are words. Whenever you hear democracy and freedom, watch out. That means it doesn't exist. In a world where it does exist, there are no proclamations as to human rights. It's built into the system. Black studies, women's studies are all part of a system that hasn't achieved that. In the future, for example, if you said, you know, there ought to be more kindness in the world and more cooperation, they would say, how do you do that? If you have nothing to offer, they say, why do you make noises? They would not accept that as anything sensible. Emotions are superfluous to the task. Your feelings in the future, all emotions, will be translated to an action pattern. You'll do medical research on how to develop bones that are getting weaker, how to strengthen them, how to improve the health of people. When emotions are translated to deeds rather than this. Now, another thing that really confuses people is the word love. Well, what would happen if you live with a replica of yourself? How long do you think you'd be together? How soon would you crash? So do you love yourself all the time? Of course not. How can you love another person? You only love certain things about people and certain things about yourself. The word love will disappear in the future and be replaced by a newer definition called extensionality, meaning enhance one another's lives. But I love you are just empty words that manifest nothing. It's how people behave to one another that indicates love. There's another thing that's very dangerous, claiming to be aware or conscious. You hear that all the time, at least I'm conscious. Well, I usually meet with those people and I say, where is your liver? I'm not sure. How fast is the blood moving through your veins and arteries? What area of the brain controls creativity? What area is responsible for emotions? What do you mean by consciousness? The human being on top of the Empire State Building can see a 3-foot ball, but a chicken hawk can see a dime and see whether it's heads or tails. The term used, consciousness or awareness, is limited to your senses. So we can never be conscious. We can grow in degrees and understand perhaps a little more about many more things, but we never can achieve consciousness because we don't see gamma rays, cosmic rays, We don't see all of those things without instrumentation. Religion has an old book with a lot of myths, packed with myths, and it doesn't change every year. Consider this. A scientist has a book on astronomy. Every year that book undergoes change. If you have a book on electronics that's 2 years old, it's obsolete. So they undergo change. But here's a minister with that one book under his arm. A real simplistic interpretation of the earth. And it caters to what people fear. What happens after death.
What happens now is that myth and superstition is pervasive, not because we don't have better ways of understanding things, but because people want to believe things that make them feel better.
Then they tell you in school that everything in nature has a purpose. You know, what's the purpose of life and all that. So they say the purpose of the eyebrows is to deflect sweat off to the side. That means there's a designer. Now, what's the purpose of coughing and sneezing? To infect other people? They say the purpose of horns on an animal is to protect itself. So I said, what's the purpose of those horns? They say, that's for ramming other animals. I said, what if the horns go off to the side? Well, that's for keeping them off the side. What if they go back? That's keep them off the back? No. Animals are born with every which way horn, and they learn how to use them.
People hope that there's some cosmic purpose to their life, but in fact, science, as far as we can tell, tells us there's no evidence that there's purpose to the universe. Does that mean there's no purpose to the universe? No, we can't prove it. It just said there's no evidence of a universe with purpose, and the universe effectively acts like it has no purpose. Now, should this depress us? In my opinion, no. Because what it means is that the purpose in our lives is the purpose we make.
We don't want people to have loyalty to corporations or a country. We want them to have loyalty to methodology and loyalty to invention, meaning to improve everything that exists, to make them better, smarter, faster, and make them available to all people. That's the kind of loyalty that's needed. If China comes up with a new way of producing automation, congratulations. If Africans come up with a great idea, congratulations. No more loyalty to corporations, to country. Loyalty to the earth and to all the people on it, and to make the earth a far better place than it is. This is the kind of loyalty I'm talking about. This is the kind of pledge allegiance I'm talking about, to pledge allegiance to methodology.
If we manage to arrive at a saner future, the tasks will be about solving problems common to all people.
We have to anticipate that the earth is our salvation. If we don't take care of it, no matter how many churches you build, we will starve to death and kill each other.
The real challenges are producing abundance, reclaiming damaged environments, sharing and creating innovative technologies, and improving communications between people.
I know we can build a far better world without war, without most crimes, without the need for prisons, and without the need for money. We can surpass that. We have the technical ability to make things available to everyone. All the wonders of technology have no meaning at all unless it enhances the lives of everyone.
The vision of applied science can serve the common good, and though this goal has eluded human civilization for centuries, the possibility of a better life for all will depend ultimately on the choices we make today. Join those who are working toward making the Venus Project a reality.
Thank you for tuning into CCN. This unique network is dedicated to free and independent media. CCN was created with the belief that information is the common heritage of all beings, which is why our live stream high-definition broadcast is easily accessible and free to view. If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Having produced over 1,000 shows in 2015, which are all archived on YouTube, we look forward to bringing you more groundbreaking, cutting-edge information in 2016. For more information on what is on, please check out our broadcast guide for weekly updates. CCN broadcasts in multiple languages and features some key voices of our challenging times who are all in pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world. CCN belongs to you, the people, and it is up to you all to keep this network on the air. Please contribute to the Network Support Fund or visit the CCN shop. We thank you all for supporting free and independent media.